Strauss had asked Hofmannsthal for a Mozart opera, and he received one. For the first production, the set designer Alfred Roller devised these costumes and sets. The place and the language was courtly Vienna at the time of Maria Theresa. The Countess became the Marschallin, Cherubino changed into Octavian.
My dear Herr von Hofmannsthal, I am awaiting the next installments with impatience. The scene is charming, as easy to compose as oil or melted butter. You are Da Ponte and Scribe rolled into one. I am delighted, maybe a bit too delicate for the mob.
Your apprehension lest the libretto be too delicate does not make me nervous. A pompous, fat, and elderly suitor favored by the father has his nose put out of joint by a dashing young lover. Could anything be plainer? Even the least sophisticated audience cannot help finding the action simple and intelligible.
Strauss wrote letter after letter to spur his librettist on.
All figures are marvelous, drawn very sharply. Do not forget that the public should laugh. Laugh, not smile and grin. Maybe for the scene between the Baron and Sophie, you can invent something even better, more comical or more down to earth.
Dear Dr. Strauss, I do understand your demand for down-to-earth comedy. But I believe that a cheerful general atmosphere with animated contrasting figures will always be superior. Think of Meistersingers or Figaro, which contain little to make one laugh, but much to smile at.
Finally, on the 27th of January 1911, Rosenkavalier had its premiere in Dresden. The director was Max Reinhardt. A brilliant international public filled the opera house, and all the important newspapers of the world sent their critics. It was a triumph. Special trains came from all over Germany, and the opera was performed 100 times during the first few months. Soon there were productions all over the world. The performance in London ended with tumultuous rapture. In Paris, Strauss was hailed as a new Mozart. In Milan, there were boos by an audience shocked to hear waltzes in a serious opera house. But Gabriele D'Annunzio wrote,
I embrace you in the name of Claudio Monteverdi and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Kaiser Wilhelm remarked,
That is no music for me.
In 1925, even a silent film version was made. Strauss and Hofmannsthal went to the shooting, and here they're seen talking to the set designer Alfred Roller. The film was directed by Robert Wiener. The premiere took place at the State Opera of Dresden. Strauss himself conducted the film music. It was a great success, but its lavishness led to the bankruptcy of the film company. Hildegard Ranschak sang Octavian many times under the composer.
He was a beautiful conductor. I just can tell you. He was the best, in my eyes, the best.
He was very precise.
Fabelhaft, fabelhaft. Because hat gehört, die Sänger gehört. Ne? Wie viel die hergeben können. Verstehen? Ja. Und das ist sehr wichtig.
Many people felt that the bittersweet music of Rosenkavalier was a step backwards after Salome and Electra, which had led Strauss to the edge of atonality.
I don't think it is a break. I think it is a quite clearly, consciously chosen way. Somewhere, I don't remember exactly where, Strauss said, end of the Electra, I arrived road of the dissonance. I spread the tonality, and I don't want to go further. I must move now backwards. He knew that, and he quite consciously came back to the tonality in Rosenkavalier. That's what he did. And from there, more and more back to tonality, if you think at the end of his life.
Hat einmal gesagt, ich kann doch Guten Morgen oder was weiß ich was nicht so komponieren, wie wenn die Elektra auftritt oder wenn die Salome das Haupt des Johannes vor sich sieht. Nicht wahr? Hat also gespürt, das verlangt einfach auch eine andere Ausdrucksweise. Ich glaube also nicht, dass man unbedingt von einem Bruch sprechen muss, sondern er ist sehr gern aus dieser überspannten Welt der Salome und Elektra einmal zurückgekehrt in eine, wie soll ich sagen, beruhigtere, normalere, etwas auch den Menschen gefälligere Welt. Es war ein unendliches Bedürfnis bei ihm vorhanden nach Kontrasten. Nach einer ernsten Oper musste er eine lustige Oper schreiben. Nach einer lustigen Oper ein ernstes Werk. Das war für ihn wie ein Rhythmus, der einfach eingehalten werden musste. Und wenn er das nicht konnte, war er eigentlich nicht recht zufrieden, nicht recht glücklich. Das sieht man übrigens auch, und Hofmannsthal hat das einmal sehr schön in einem Brief an Banwitz gesagt. Strauss hat verstanden, über Kontraste hinweg Bogen zu schlagen. Und das ist ein sehr wahres Wort.
After Rosenkavalier, Hofmannsthal proposed writing the text for a one-act opera. The opera was to be performed in a double bill with a play.
I am extremely curious, dear Mr. Hofmannsthal, about what you have to tell me about the little Molière thing. I have nothing to work on, and I no longer take the least pleasure in writing symphonies.
The little thing was Hofmannsthal's adaptation of Molière's Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, for which Strauss composed some incidental music. These costumes and sets for the first production were by Ernst Stern. For the second half of the evening, Strauss and Hofmannsthal had devised an opera called Ariadne auf Naxos. When this strange hybrid was given in Stuttgart in 1912, Strauss experienced failure for the first time since Guntram.
The first idea was charming, starting from the most basic comedy to reach via commedia dell'arte the heights of purest, wordless music. But because of the Philistine attitude of the public, it failed. The opera audience did not care much for the Molière, and the theater audience did not want to hear opera.
The opera was rewritten, and the premiere of the now most often performed version, consisting of a musical prologue and the opera Ariadne, opened in Vienna in 1916. Its success and popularity, although less than that of Rosenkavalier, have not diminished to this day. Strauss had written one of the most brilliant and difficult coloratura arias in the history of opera.
Also das war ein Werk, das ihm auch besonders lieb war. Er hat einmal zu mir gesagt, wissen Sie, was ich so mit der linken Hand gemacht habe, das ist immer am besten geworden. Und die Ariadne war ja so eine Zwischenarbeit, nicht wahr? Und er sagte, ich will immer zu viel und verderbe mir es dann manchmal damit. Bei der Ariadne war das nicht der Fall. Da ist er in einer einfacheren, weniger stark ausgeprägten Polyphonie geblieben.
Also für mich sind Elektra und auf der anderen Seite Ariadne die Gipfelpunkte. Es wurde einfacher, sag mal, im harmonisch-melodischen Sinn, aber es wurde nicht leichter, es war schwer. Aber dass einer das kann, nicht wahr? Also aus diesem Überschwang der dreifachen Geigen, der 7 Klarinetten und 8 Hörner und Tuben. Ne? Das ist fabelhaft. Ja. Und dieses vollkommene Abkommen von Wagner.
While the Great War raged, Strauss and Hofmannsthal began to look for a mythological subject. The result was Die Frau ohne Schatten. Again, Alfred Roller designed the sets and costumes for the premiere in 1919. In no other opera did Strauss invest more time or thought. Both Strauss and Hofmannsthal felt that it was their most important work up to then, filled with noble intentions. If Rosenkavalier was Strauss's Figaro, Frau ohne Schatten became his Magic Flute. Only during the last decade, 60 years after it was composed, has the public begun to appreciate this complex and grandiose opera which weaves the world of human beings and ghosts, the living and the dead, into a rich pattern. After Frau ohne Schatten, the Vienna Opera House engaged Strauss as their permanent conductor, the post previously held by Gustav Mahler. The Viennese writer Stefan Zweig remembered in his memoirs,
"Our generation in Vienna grew up in the love and veneration of Gustav Mahler. We were for a long time unable to recognize anybody else. But every honest person among us has felt an increasing admiration for Richard Strauss. No musician of our day has given so much color and luminosity to music. The figure of Richard Strauss has grown upon the beloved opera house, upon our town, and upon our spiritual world. A resounding link in the incomparable chain which leads from Mozart to Bruckner and Mahler, and through him to a great future."
Strauss installed himself in the splendid house in Belvedere. There was much wrangling over the salary he was to receive for conducting 50 performances a year. Besides his own work, his repertoire included operas by Mozart and Wagner, also Carmen and Freischütz. His concerts of Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms and Bruckner became legendary. In 1924, Vienna celebrated his 60th birthday with a Strauss festival, which lasted 2 weeks. Strauss kept the Belvedere house until the end of his life, moving regularly between Garmisch and Vienna. The background of Vienna, with its gaiety and coffeehouse society, might well have seduced Richard Strauss into writing the music for a ballet called Schlagobers. Coming from the composer of Salome and Rosenkavalier, its lightness of subject and its simple melodies shocked many people.
The only style I am looking for is one which fits the essence of the work. Each work has to be written in a different language and has to wear the dress designed for it. It's no good having aesthetic prejudices in art. With waltzes and beautiful decor and costumes, Schlagobers is a colorful and childlike ballet for the feet of ballerinas and not for the heads of philosophers. People expect new ideas from me all the time, grand achievements. I think I have earned the right to compose music I like. I want to give pleasure. I need it.
Strauss was now in his 60s and one of the most highly paid musicians in the world. He continued to conduct, but opera and concert performances were mostly a winter season's occupation, which left him time to travel. Travel for Strauss was still the grand tour. If Strauss was thoroughly German, he was also a European, and he spent days visiting monuments and museums whose contents he already knew by heart. His knowledge of European culture was formidable and gave him the impetus for much of his work. Strauss was a hard-working man, combining the life of a conductor with that of a composer, and there were concerts everywhere. His day followed a well-planned and regulated rhythm. There could be few artists so free of scandal, yet he could look at himself ironically. And in his next opera, Intermezzo, a domestic comedy, he poked fun at his own seemingly dull private life. He wrote the libretto himself with many autobiographical overtones, and the set was a replica of his Garmisch house, where Pauline's often temperamental behavior loomed large. The hero himself was a diligent, card-playing, rather bourgeois composer in love with a nagging wife.
Deine ewige Anwesenheit, du bist immer zu Hause. Andere Männer gehen in ihr Büro, die vermehrte Arbeit
trifft dich doch nicht.
Na wen denn?
Doch die Dienstboten.
Denen ich alles befehlen muss. Überall nachsehen, ob auch wirklich alles geschieht. Schon allein dieses fortwährende Telefonieren
Können doch auch die Mädchen besorgen.
wer macht dann die Hausarbeit?
Impatient as always, Strauss wrote to his faithful librettist,
Dear Mr. Hofmannsthal, I have nothing to work on, totally burnt out, so please write something. It may even be a second Rosenkavalier if you can't think of anything better. If the worst comes to the worst, a little diversion, a one act to keep me in practice, oil to prevent the imagination from rusting up.
Hofmannsthal sent him Arabella, a lyrical comedy which drew much from the success of Rosenkavalier. The milieu was again Vienna, but this time the Vienna of the good old days of Kaiser Franz Joseph. With Arabella, the now familiar toing and froing between composer and writer began again.
I am waiting for you while I fight with a symphony which is even less amusing than shaking May-bugs from a tree.
On the 14th of July, 1929, Strauss sent the following telegram: "First act excellent, many thanks and congratulations." But Hofmannsthal never read it. His son had committed suicide, and on the day of the funeral, Hofmannsthal himself died from a stroke.
Much of what I produced in all the loneliness of youth, entirely for myself, were operas without music. Your wishes subsequently gave me a purpose without restricting my freedom. You have rewarded me as richly as any artist can reward another.
He was buried at the little cemetery at Rodin. All the rose bushes in Vienna must have been plucked bare, wrote a fellow poet. Strauss was inconsolable.
This genius, this great poet, this sensitive collaborator, this good friend, this unique talent. Never before had a musician such help and such support. No one will ever replace him for me or the world of music.
Hofmannsthal's death brought to an end the collaboration of a great poet and a great composer.
Arabella is probably the first time in which the libretto may be better than the music. In that fabulous Hofmannsthal-Strauss collaboration, maybe that's the only time when I think the libretto a fraction higher as the music. But I love that piece also.
Strauss, glaube ich, hat Hofmannsthal außerordentlich hoch geschätzt, und zwar im Sinne eines Führers zu kulturellen Nuancen, die er selbst in sich nicht von vornherein gehabt hat. Und deshalb hat er sich Hofmannsthal auch so anvertraut. Er wusste, er hat das auch einmal ausgesprochen, mein Geschmack war nie so ganz sicher. Und Hofmannsthal hat mich das gelehrt. Und ich glaube, das ist einer der Grundzüge, warum er auch so geduldig war, weil Hofmannsthal ja oft sehr ungeduldig reagiert hat, wenn Strauss irgendeinen Vorschlag gemacht hat und er ihm dann Strauss geschrieben hat, warum werden Sie auch immer gleich so böse, wenn wir einmal nicht übereinstimmen. Aber er hat sich nie irritieren lassen und Hofmannsthal hat das auch außerordentlich zu schätzen gewusst. Dass dieser große Mann, denn er hat immer gesagt, er ist die bedeutendere Persönlichkeit als ich, dass dieser große Mann eben so ruhig hingenommen hat, Kritik verdaut hat, Kritik sogar gewünscht hat. Das war übrigens nebenbei gesagt einer der Grundzüge. Er wollte, dass man sich zu seinem Werk kritisch stellt.
The world of Arabella represented the end of an era, but greater and more horrible changes were taking place around Richard Strauss. The first performance was in Dresden on the 1st of July 1933, 5 months after Hitler had come to power. It was conducted by Clemens Krauss. Viorica Ursuleak, later to become Krauss's wife, sang Arabella, and they became Strauss's closest friends and collaborators. From then on, Krauss conducted most of Strauss's operas, and Ursuleak, who was the great opera singer of the 30s and 40s, was to sing most of Strauss's leading roles.
Das war eine der schönsten Aufführungen für mich, nicht wahr? Es war die erste Uraufführung von Richard Strauss. Jeder gab sein Bestes her. Es war ein solcher stürmischer Erfolg nach dem ersten Duett von den zwei Schwestern. Ich glaubte, die Oper geht nicht weiter, nicht? In Amsterdam hat mir der Strauss dann dirigiert, nicht? Da muss ich sagen, hat der Strauss sich nicht an seine Vorschriften gehalten. Er hat mir die Auftrittsmusik mit dem Wasserglas im 3. Akt in einem Tempo dirigiert bei der Probe allerdings. Das war fürchterlich. Ich konnte die Treppe gar nicht hinunterkommen, war ganz atemlos. Und da war ich ganz, ganz böse und sagte, so dirigiert man das nicht, ist schöne Musik, Herr Doktor. Und er so mit einem genierten Lächeln sagte ich mal, ach, diese Quart-Sextakkorde. Er hat sich ganz einfach geniert, diese schöne Melodie zu spielen, nicht wahr?
When Strauss chose Stefan Zweig as the librettist for his next opera, The Silent Woman, serious problems arose. Stefan Zweig was Jewish, and their collaboration was to bring them into conflict with the Nazi government. There began a chapter which was to tarnish the name of Richard Strauss with an accusation that still lingers. Strauss had been offered the role of president of the Reich Musikkammer, the department responsible for music, and Strauss accepted it gladly. With the exodus from Germany of much of the artistic talent, the Nazi regime made sure that they absorbed some of the remaining prestigious cultural representatives. At the opening ceremony of the German Composers' Day, he said,
Die Musik ist die Sprache, die alle Völker eint und deren Zeichen sich alle lieben und achten müssen.
Rinnovo il saluto che prima ho già avuto l'onore di portare.
Strauss had taken over when Toscanini had refused to conduct in Bayreuth. He also stepped in for the Jewish Bruno Walter.
Germania musicale in nome dell'Italia fascista musicale.
When Zweig wanted to withdraw from the opera project, Strauss wrote a letter which expressed his political and moral views better than anything else.
Dear Herr Zweig, do you think I have ever let myself be guided in any sort of action by the thought that I am German? Do you think that Mozart deliberately composed in an Aryan manner? For me, there are only two categories of human beings, the talented and the untalented. Who told you that I have involved myself so deeply in politics? Is it because I conducted a concert in place of Bruno Walter? I did it as a favor to the orchestra. Or because I stepped in for Toscanini? That I did as a favor to Bayreuth. It has nothing to do with politics. That I hold office as president of the State Music Council? I do it to bring about good and prevent greater misfortune. Simply because I know my artistic duty.
Sie sehen aber famos aus. Geht's Ihnen gut?
Ja, aber ich bin glücklich, dass ich wieder auf dem heiligen Hügel sein darf. Das ist mir eine große Auszeichnung, das habe ich Ihnen schon so oft versichert, hier den Basketball leiten zu dürfen. Und es ist mir eine ganz besondere Genugtuung, dass ich meine Dirigententätigkeit mit dem Basketball beschließe.
Meister, wir müssen anfangen. Ist Ihnen recht, dass wir im zweiten Akt zuerst anfangen?
Jawohl, hier ist alles recht.
Kommen Sie.
2 days before the opening of The Silent Woman, the directors of the Opera House decided to remove Zweig's name from the program. Strauss went berserk. The name was restored and the opera opened. Neither Hitler nor Goebbels was present. All future performances were forbidden. Strauss wrote a letter to Zweig insulting the government, and the letter was intercepted by the police, and Strauss had to resign from the Reichsmusikkammer. He was later accused of not using the fascist salute and of keeping contact with Jews. But in 1936, he composed the Olympic hymn. Much has been written and said about his role in Hitler's Germany. Much has been misreported and misunderstood. It will take yet another generation to heal the wounds and to come to a more dispassionate understanding of why and how things happen. When Hitler came to power, Strauss was 70. One can accuse him of egoism and the vanity of an artist whose main interest was to continue to write music. One can also accuse him of political blindness and of a certain cowardice in accepting things in order to protect his Jewish daughter-in-law. But by all accounts, although acquiescent, he was not a Nazi.
I belong to the people who, when the interest of art is at stake, never think that it could be in conflict with their private interest.
From 1936 onwards, his relationship with the government was distant, but he never broke officially with the regime. For the last 13 years of his life, he was left in peace. His music continued to be performed. Stefan Zweig had to leave Germany. His novels, poems, and plays were forbidden. In 1942, he committed suicide in South America at the age of 61. Strauss felt hurt and misunderstood. Many thought him indifferent to the horrible things which were happening around him. He withdrew to Garmisch, driving to Munich from time to time to hear some music.
I think in the autumn 1941 it must have been, and Krauss conducted Siegfried, and Strauss had already asked me by letter when the next Siegfried would be. He would like to hear the third act. He loved it especially. And he came, and Helena Braun was singing Siegfried Brünnhilde. I saw that Strauss was touched to tears by her singing and by the beautiful music, which I had never believed before if I wouldn't have seen it myself, because he never showed any emotion.
Maybe he did not let the emotion be shown. It showed it through the music, because when it came to it, he knew, of course, exactly where the climaxes has to be built. You wouldn't see it on him, but you would feel it through his music.
Es war für ihn wohl kaum möglich, das zu artikulieren, das auszusprechen, was ihn innerlich bewegt hat. Es ist ja auch in seinen Briefen kaum je etwas Substanzielles über seine Werke zu finden, sondern es sind die Dinge des Alltags oder der Konzerte, von Aufführungen und so weiter ist die Rede, von Erfolgen, aber über die innere Welt, warum Salome komponiert hat, warum Elektra komponiert hat, wie zum Rosenkavalier gekommen ist, darüber hat sich völlig ausgeschwiegen.
War sehr verschlossen. Hat Musik und Leben sehr getrennt. Bei seinem musikalischen Schaffen hat sich nichts reinlesen lassen, hat nichts erzählt davon. Das war eine Privatsphäre. Aber mit uns Laien hat nicht gesprochen. Er hat gesagt, ihr versteht ja doch nichts davon. Auch keine Kritik an irgendwelchen Aufführungen hat geduldet. Er hat gesagt, die muss man so hinnehmen, mal eine gute, mal eine schlechtere Sängerin. Das Gesamtwerk ist das Wesentliche.
Ich weiß nur, dass ich mir mal einen furchtbaren Schiefer eingezogen habe, indem ich also einen Hauch von Kritik am Leben, am persönlichen, menschlichen Leben von Richard Wagner geäußert habe. Da war bei uns dann der Haussegen. Ich war da einige Tage völlig unten durch. Über ein Richard Wagner hast du überhaupt nicht deinen Schnabel zu wetzen. Ein Genie wie Richard Wagner und so weiter und so weiter. Also,
Er hat ja auch gesagt, Richard Wagners Musik ist ein Gipfel, dessen Gipfel ich eben nur versucht habe zu umgehen. Also ein Werk wie Tristan ist unübertrefflich.
Er empfand seine Rolle als die eines Letzten, dass die Musik mit ihm irgendwie zu Ende gehe.
At the outset of the war, Strauss composed Friedenstag and Die Liebe der Danae, without achieving his earlier success. And then he and Clemens Krauss set to work on the libretto of what was to be Strauss's farewell to the opera stage, Capriccio. On the 28th of April 1941, the members of the famous Schneiderhan Quartet took the train to Garmisch to visit the old composer who was longing to hear some chamber music. He also wanted to play to them the sextet for his new opera. Professor Strasser exchanged his violin for an old 8mm camera.
Wir sind am 28. April 1941 nach Garmisch gefahren. Kriegszeit war natürlich, es gab keine Autos mehr, kurzum, wir fuhren mit einem Einspänner zum Hause Zöppritzstraße Nummer 42 und dort hat uns, ich habe geleitet, Strauss ganz persönlich empfangen und hat auch den Einspänner, den Fiakerkutscher gezahlt aus eigener Tasche. Dann sind wir in das Haus hineingegangen und haben am Vormittag zunächst einmal ihm vorgespielt, ich erinnere mich genau, ein Haydn-Quartett und dann den Lieblingssatz seines Vaters, das war der langsame Satz aus dem Dissonanzenquartett von Mozart, haben fachgesimpelt mit ihm und sind im Garten spazieren gegangen. Zu mittags haben wir mit ihm gegessen und interessant, es hat ja damals nichts mehr Gutes gegeben. Wir haben ein Lammfleisch gekriegt, das war noch außerhalb der Fleischmarken. Und dann nach dem Mittagessen musste er, Pauline hat ja das große Wort geführt in seinem Haus, musste er sich schön zur Ruhe geben. Während dieser Zeit sind wir miteinander auch mit Pauline Strauss im Garten spazieren gegangen. Und nachdem Strauss dann ausgeschlafen war, haben wir uns wieder in den Salon begeben und spielte uns aus der fertiggestellten Reinschrift die Ouvertüre zu Capriccio vor. Also haben wir es studiert, wir haben sogar die Noten eingerichtet, wir haben die Druckbögen erhalten und dann haben wir es im Mai 1942 hier in einem Konzert uraufgeführt. Das Ende war eigentlich, dass wir vor dem Haus gesessen sind. Strauss ist im Garten spazieren gegangen, hat sich dann zu uns gesetzt und hat sehr viel von seiner Jugend erzählt, von seinem Vater. Und ich glaube, in meinem Musikerleben ist das nicht nur der schönste, sondern auch der bedeutungsvollste Tag meiner Musikerlaufbahn gewesen.
But while the bombs carried out their nightly destruction, the artists, ignoring the deprivations of war, began to rehearse Capriccio. And it opened on the 28th of October 1942.
Wir haben den Krieg gar nicht beachtet. Wir haben weitergearbeitet, so als ob gar kein Krieg wäre. Wir sind immer in den Luftschutzkeller gerannt und das alles. Aber die Arbeit war nie unterbrochen worden. Und wir hatten auf der Bühne Bühnenarbeiter, und zwar französische Gefangene. Und das war also wirklich was Rührendes. Diese baten den Krauss, er möchte ihnen erlauben, auf der Bühne zu sein während der Proben. Denn sie fühlen sich da bei dieser Aufführung wie in ihrer eigenen Heimat. Und es geschah wirklich, dass einer das Capriccio in französischer Sprache übersetzt hat und meinem Mann das zum Geburtstag geschenkt hat. Es war wirklich rührend. Und wir konnten nicht den Namen von diesem Mann finden, nicht wahr? Wo der gelandet ist, wissen wir nicht wahr? Und das Buch ist ja auch verbrannt.
Capriccio, a conversation piece, puts the old question, which comes first, the words or the music? A discussion about the opera had become the opera itself.
What I visualized was a witty, dramatized paraphrase of the theme, first the words, then the music. The fight between words and music has been with me since the beginning of my life and has ended in Capriccio with a question mark. With Capriccio, my life's work has come to an end. What I write now has very little significance in the history of music. I don't enjoy writing operas any longer. I would rather write a dramatic thesis, a theatrical fugue like Verdi at the end of Falstaff, or think of Beethoven's fugue. These are the conversations of old men.
The opera houses and concert halls where Strauss's music had been performed lay in ruins, and it was this more than anything else which made him cry. He wrote Metamorphosen, a work for 23 strings, the funeral music for the destroyed country. It was finished on the day the Russians entered Vienna, the Americans took Nuremberg, and the British occupied Arnhem.
I remember how in Argentina I conducted Salome at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and Electra at 9 o'clock. Now, I sit as a sad invalid among the ruins of Berlin, Dresden, Munich, Vienna. It is terrible. The Munich theater where my father played the first horn in Siegfried and where I conducted my first opera in 1886, totally destroyed. I listened last night to the Schubert octet. What does one care about the destruction of the so-called world? The German spirit is not in the Prussian emperor, but is in such works. They will remain until the crust of the earth has turned to ice.
Ich habe hier einen Brief meines Großvaters anlässlich meines 12. Geburtstages, den ich hier vorlesen will. Er ist am 3.3.1944 in Garmisch geschrieben. Mein lieber guter Christian.
My dear good Christian, May Mozart's blessing from heaven accompany you throughout a happy life. And may the love of your grandfather remain as a guiding star a long time after he is gone.
Auch nach meinem Hinscheiden dir ein treuer Leitstern bleiben. Dein 12. Geburtstag fällt mit
Your 12th birthday coincides with the terrible event of the almost total destruction of our beautiful old city.
Wie die Menschen vor 165
165 years ago, people regarded the earthquake which destroyed Lisbon as the turning point, instead of realizing that history changed with Gluck's Iphigenia. This opera brought to an end a cultural development which had lasted for 3,000 years. The new music gave us Mozart's melodies and revealed to us the human soul which philosophers have been trying to discover and comprehend for centuries.
Denker von Jahrtausenden bemüht haben.
On your birthday, you will always remember the barbarism and its cruel deeds which reduced our beautiful Germany to rubble and ashes. When, after 30 years, you once more read this melancholy letter, I hope you will also remember your grandfather, who for almost 70 years worked for a German culture and the honor and glory of his fatherland. I send you blessings. I wish you health and the strength to work in a way worthy of our family tradition. Your loving grandfather, Richard Strauss.
Deines mit herzlichen Grüßen dich innig liebenden Großpapa Richard Strauss.
On the 30th of April 1945, Garmisch was occupied by American troops. At 11 o'clock, a Major Kramer ordered the family to leave the house. Strauss received the young major and, giving only his name, added, "I am the composer of Rosenkavalier and Salome." Major Kramer's manner immediately changed and he gave Strauss a handshake. The total victory of the spirit over primitive matter was Strauss's reply. During the last years of his life, honors and accolades were again bestowed on the aged composer.
Me to felicitate you upon this, the occasion of your birthday anniversary, and to wish you many exceedingly happy returns of the day.
Lieber verehrter Meister, wir Sänger und Künstler danken Ihnen von ganzem Herzen für all die herrliche Musik, die Sie erschaffen. Sie haben die Welt schöner und reicher gemacht.
Danke. Vielen Dank. Bitte grüßt Ihre Kollegen, sagen Sie, ich hätte mich jetzt sehr gefreut über diese schöne Probe, über die herrlichen Stimmen.
Danke.
Und es wird eine schöne Vorstellung werden. Danke Ihnen vielmals.
In 1947, Strauss was invited by Sir Thomas Beecham to come to London for a Strauss festival, and he undertook his first aeroplane trip.
This is the BBC third programme. We present the second of two complete performances of Elektra, a music drama in one act by Richard Strauss.
Strauss himself conducted one concert in the Albert Hall, and the entire audience rose to its feet.
Today, I am counted among the old and the past. Once, I was in the avant-garde. I do not care. In each moment of my life, I have been true to myself. I am well aware that my symphonic work will never reach the giant genius of Beethoven. I know the distance which separates my operas from Richard Wagner's eternal works. But my operas, from the third act of Guntram to Capriccio, may claim a modest place next to those unique creations.
On the 8th of September 1949, Strauss's life came to an end. It had spanned the time of King Ludwig of Bavaria right through to the post-war era of Germany. Shortly before, he had written his 4 last songs, a requiem filled with readiness for death. The composer was never to hear them. The premiere was given 8 months later, Kirsten Fleischstadt sang, and Wilhelm Furtwängler conducted. A London audience applauded.